Right, some more work on shaping then. We finished shaping the back piece. I've just sewn the ends in here so you can sort of see the very slight indent, which sort of matches the schematic, this very slight indent at the back. Obviously a much smaller piece than you've got, but you can kind of see you've got the slight slant to the shoulders and the slight indent on the neck. And this is the back piece. We've got our arms or sleeves, or I can't remember what it's called, arms I think. Place a marker for armholes. We've got the armholes marked here. Don't forget yours are going to be much bigger, obviously, and the proportion's going to be a lot different. I just want to show you the techniques. So that's the back piece. The front piece I've got here in progress, and we start off working it in exactly the same way. So I have done one full chart repeat and marked the armholes in the same way. So if I put my back piece on the top here, line it up at the corner, you will see those two markers there are matching, so they are lined up. But now we are going to work slightly differently. So on the back piece we did a full 38 row from the chart, and then we did another full 38 row from the chart. On the front we work a full 38 rows, and then we work 14. And after 14, that is when we're going to start doing our shaping. So the reason for that is, if I look at this again, look at our picture again, and we know that we've done this slight indent on the back neck here. Well, the shoulders are going to be the same on the front and back, but you can see the front has a much deeper dip round the neck. So there's a lot more shaping that's going to have to happen a lot more sort of earlier on. You know, we're going to have to start decreasing to get this nice deep curve in there. So that's why we're starting the shaping earlier on the front piece. So other differences for the front, mostly the same. Obviously we've got the same sort of techniques. We've got patterning together and patterning to end and all that kind of thing. So you know how to do that. The other difference, which is really helpful actually, is we've got row numbers this time round. So you can happily see where you are on the chart, as well as working those decreases as you go. Okay, so I find that really, really helpful. So not much extra technique wise to show you. The only thing I did want to show you is we're going to leave some stitches on a holder, leave the stitches live on a holder and work half and then go back to them. I just want to show you how I do that, and I'm sure you've got your own ways as well. But let's just do that bit, then I think you're completely fine to do some shaping. Right, yet again, I'm going to just reiterate, I've got a much smaller section here that I am working on, much smaller than you will have with yours. So obviously all the numbers that you are working to are written in the pattern. You're going to do 56, for example. I'm not going to do that many because I've only got 41 in total on my needles. But what I need to do is I need to get to row 15, because I'm going to be working row 15 before I do anything else, before I do any of those decreases or any of the twiddly bits. I've got to make sure I'm working in pattern. Now, in the past, what I've noticed, I've worked in a local yarn shop in the past, and we had lots of knit groups and things like that. And what I've noticed when I've worked in knit groups and sort of seen dozens and dozens of people with their knitting, an awful lot of people actually will write out the pattern, which I think is a brilliant idea, because you write it how it makes sense to you in your head. And if you've got lots of things going on, so for example on row 15 I've got a pattern going on, but I've also got decreasing going on. If you feel that you need to write that out so it makes sense to you, and so you don't sort of forget to do your knitting two together or whatever it is you've got to do, and that is absolutely brilliant. And please don't think that is something that's peculiar to you, because like I said, I would suggest that a good 90% of people in those knit groups had written out their patterns in a way that made sense to them, which is marvellous, I think. Right, so enough chat. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of take an estimate at how many of my stitches I should be working on. I've got to somehow just make a little sample piece that will give me a curve here. So ignore my numbers is what I'm basically saying to you. So for my stitches, and yours, I think I said 53, didn't I? Did I say 53? 56. You will be doing this pattern for 56 stitches. Okay, I think I'm going to do them for maybe 15. Okay, so working row 15, and I won't talk you through the pattern because by this stage you probably can do this one in your sleep. So I'm just going to work, say, 15 stitches across and pretend I've done 56, as you will have. Oh, okay. Right, okay, so this will bring me up to 15 stitches, and I'm going to stop. Now I need you to pretend that I've done the 56 stitches that I need to do. Okay, and what's going to happen here is when I turn my work, all of these stitches are left unworked. Now it might be, I cannot think in my head at the moment, it might be that there is enough space on your cable that you can leave them, but I don't think there will be. I think we're going to have to get those stitches off there somehow. And how I'm going to choose to do that is with our trusty cotton again. And I'm just going to thread up my bodkin. Any kind of thread will do, any kind of waste yarn of any sort. If it can be smooth, that would be better, because your yarn that you're working with is that lovely furry kid classic and it likes to cling. So if you can use a smoother thread, I think you will find it easier. Now all I'm going to do is take my needle and I'm going to even put it on the put it through the stitch marker there. I don't know where yours is going to fall, if it falls with the stitch marker at the end or not, but just put the whole lot, stitch markers and all. That's nice, isn't it? Put your needle through all of those stitches. Okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to treat this little yarn, we're going to treat that as our stitch holder. Okay, and I'm really sure that this is not news to any of you, but just in case, you just never know, do you? You just never know when you're passing a tip on to somebody who hasn't seen it before. You can always fast forward, can't you? That's my thinking on it. I have to say, as I'm doing this, I'm noticing the smudges and teeth marks. Yes, teeth marks on my pattern. My cat, for some reason, has decided that it's time that she gave everything a good old chew. I don't know why. And my patterns, for some reason, seem to be highly palatable to her. Right, I've pulled that yarn through, and you can see that my needle is now free of those stitches. So you're going to have an awful lot more, maybe 70, about 69 or 70, I think, stitches that you're going to need to keep safe. And what I tend to do is just tie a little knot, and that's going to keep those stitches secure and stop them going anywhere if I sort of fling it about the place. I don't plan to, but we just don't know these days, do we? Would not be surprised if earthquakes came into play, quite honestly. So that's there. You can see, if I hold that up, those stitches are held nice and safely on this waste yarn. The stitches are still live, so when I'm ready to work them again, I can pick them up, no problem. But what it leaves me with is this first half. Can you see sort of right side of the piece, which I can focus on and work on and concentrate on shaping and working through. Okay, right, so I have therefore completed row 15 for this part. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn now, and now I am back onto row 16. I've got to start with a pattern 2 together, so I'm actually over reading from left to right on row 16, and what I need to do is work out where I am on that pattern. Okay, easy peasy, because I finished right at the end just before a pattern repeat thankfully. But you know, you are going to just need to pay attention to that. You should, if you've still got your stitch markers in, it shouldn't be a problem, because you'll be able to use them as a sort of anchor point to see where you are, won't you? So I'm off and running, and I'm going to pattern 2 together, and fortunately the pattern on row 16 is just purl all the way across. And that is really it. We're off and running and cooking with gas. There's nothing extra to tell you over and above what we've done with the shaping on the first side. So let's just remember, we're just going to be mindful of where we are in our pattern because we're not working a full width of the work. Our stitch markers will give us an anchor point if we've got them in there. It's not too late. If you haven't got them in there yet, you can add them in, not a problem. We need to be mindful of that. When we're casting off stitches, just remember that you cannot count a stitch as cast off until it's passed over the top, or until a stitch passes over the top of it, and be mindful of where you count the stitch that's on your needle. You'll know what this means if you've watched the last video. But there really is no difference now. There is no difference to what we did for the front. Shaping for the back as there is to the front. It's just a more gradual shaping to give us that much deeper V for the front of our work. So I'm just going to go ahead and do some shaping. It's going to be very different, mine, because I've got to try somehow and get a curve in here. wish me luck. I'm going to do that, and we'll move on to sort of joining it together and looking around the ribbing for the neck. Right, I have done some, it's not really shaping, is it? It's just a great big line, but it is purely and simply because I haven't got very many stitches to play with. You can kind of start to see a curve here. Yours is going to be much more gradual and a much more beautiful curve on the shaping. I've just come back because I want to show you what we're going to do with these stitches. But if I put the front piece onto the back piece, using your imagination a bit, you will see the front is much lower than the back, and it does look distorted because the pieces are much smaller, but the principle is the same: a higher back and a lower front. Okay, so when you have completed the first half of the shaping, you're going to go back to what you're going to go back to these stitches that are not worked. Okay, so we're going to have to pick them back up from the waste yarn, and what I'm going to do, I've got to be very careful here because I've got my little stitch marker on there, look, but I'm going to just cut that knot so the piece of yarn is stretched taut, and all of those stitches need to go back onto my needle. And because they're like, you will have a cable needle as well, it doesn't matter which end you start at, you can start at either, and just thread all those stitches through. Oops, I missed my stitch marker, didn't I? Remember, I put the stitch marker on as well. So go through the stitch marker and through every stitch, just picking it up back onto the needle. And when I have finished doing this, you'll see what I mean about smooth yarn being preferable. Okay, so that's the last one there. So my stitches are now on the cable here, and I can grab this piece of waste yarn and just pull it out, and because it's smooth it will come out really easy. No clinging onto any wool or anything like that. Right, so my stitches are now back onto my needle, my little stitch marker there, and ready to move on to the second side of the neck shaping. Okay, so we are back in the situation that we were in on the back piece, where we've got some stitches to cast off, and we just want to leave a few stitches at the edge to work. So that is what we're now going to do. So we're going to start by rejoining the yarn to these stitches, and I actually, after all that, I can dispense with that stitch marker because I'm about to cast off those stitches, so didn't really need that, did I? Okay, we're ready to join our yarn, and all I'm going to do that is put my needle into the stitch as if to knit, just loop the end of the yarn. I've not made a knot or anything at all. I don't know how you do your joins, this is how I do mine, and just knit it. That's all I'm going to do to join my yarn in, no problem. So obviously you're going to adhere to the numbers in your pattern in terms of how many you're going to cast off. I think you have to cast off 13, and I'm going to cast off some to leave myself with 15 stitches on the other end like I did on this one. It's going to be a really awfully distorted, misshapen neck on my sample piece, but don't worry about it. I am just purely concerned with the techniques rather than the actual numbering. So I've worked out that I need to cast off 11 stitches, and I want to just remind you again how to count them and what to do with the stitch that's on your needle. Okay, so I've got 1 stitch on my needle at the moment, and I want to cast off 11 stitches in total. So I'm going to knit the next stitch and bring that stitch over the top of it, and I can only now count number 1. Okay, I've only now cast off 1 stitch, and I'm now going to do the next one and 2 and work along like that. 3, 4, and this is how you will be counting your casting off as you go. You can only count number 1 when you've passed that stitch over the top of it. All right. Right, now let's say I'd worked the other way around and decided I wanted to end up with 15 stitches. Okay, I am now at the point where if I look at this like this, I've got 15 stitches on my needle, which is brilliant, except I've also got 1 on this needle. So we must never forget to take that stitch that we're kind of been working that cast off with, never forget to include that. So in actual fact, I've got to cast off 1 more to get the correct amount of stitches left on this needle. So it depends which way you're counting it, whether you're counting to have how many you want left or whether you're counting how many you need to cast off. Just be mindful of how you're counting, because you can't start counting cast off until the stitch is passed over the top of it. And if you're counting what's left, you must always remember to include the stitch that's on your right needle. Okay, so I am now left with a sufficient amount of stitches based on what I've got going on the other side. You will end up with 56 stitches here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off this row in pattern, and I am on row 15. Okay, to finish off in pattern, and then off I'm going to go again. And again, if you look at my pattern here, you can see I'm talked through all the way through with what row I'm on and what I need to be doing in terms of making sure I work the pattern correctly as I'm reducing my stitches. You've got some twiddly bits in here because your pattern is telling you, as you're working it through, you're going to be sort of interrupting at points. You're going to be interrupting those yarn overs and things like that. But don't worry, because that's all indicated in the pattern for you. That is no different to how you've been working your chart to date. Don't be put off or concerned about it. Work through it. You know you've got all the techniques at this point to be able to do it, no problem at all. Obviously, if you've got into any kind of jam, give us a shout, but I think you're going to be absolutely fine. So I'm going to finish off the pattern and the shaping on my little sample piece here before we finish off and do the neck. Right, before you go off and do your the front side shaping, I just want to draw your attention to the errata or the pattern correction that we put in your tracking information, and that falls in this section. So on the second side of the neck shaping, if you look down, obviously you're going to have yours in a lovely booklet, but if you look down, your last mentioned row is row 31. We actually should have a row 32 in here as well, just as we had on the first side, and row 32 will just be exactly the same as on the first side, which is pattern to end, Then you're going to work your 6 rows in pattern without shaping, and that's then going to mean you've completed a full 38 rows in pattern before you do that shoulder shaping. And the shoulder shaping works such that this time you're not casting off on the first row, because that's a right side, and you would be casting off in the wrong position. You'd be casting off in the sort of the inside section, which you don't want to do. You'd be casting off on the second row, which it has to be a purl row, so that you're getting that stepped effect coming from the outer edge of the work. So really important. Apologies for that. It just happens with designers occasionally, you know, completely understandably. We've just got an omitted row in there, so as long as you put that in, everything's going to work out fine and dandy. Okay, so my very unusual shaped piece is done, and if you have a look, got lots of ends coming off it, but I'll sew those in. I mean, it is a lot deeper. You can see that the neck is a lot deeper. It's actually closer to the proportions of the neck that you will have on your piece, but what is not close to the proportions is the shoulders, of course. But the main point being, it's a much deeper neck that you have shaped for the front part of your piece. So when I put it, wrong side facing here, when I put it on the front, onto the back, you can see, you can see that the neck is now nicely shaped. It's going to come up high at the back and lower down at the front, which is a good shape for a neck, I think. So that is your shaping done. Let's move on to the neckband.